Obviously, Hill and Waddle are concerns for the Browns. How do the Browns deal with that? What can the Browns exploit when you look at this matchup?
I don't know. I think a lot of teams ask themselves that question facing this team. I am not envious of Joe Woods this week. I genuinely think this is kind of a concerning matchup given what the Browns' issues have been. I think really considering the problems we've seen with this defense, I think a lot of it was confusion early on and maybe the system being a little too complicated. I know fans are, jonesing, I think, for a little bit more man-to-man in this game than zone defense. I think you have to do whatever it takes to make sure you aren't just letting those guys run all over you. And I think really a lot of it is going to start with Myles Garrett and those guys up front finding a way to put pressure on Tua Tagovailoa. Because like I said, he hasn't really thrown the ball away. He hasn't been sacked a whole ton. Obviously, we remember the big sacks, the big times he was brought down when he suffered those concussions, but that hasn't really been the norm for him this year. So I think it's all about the front of this defense finding a way to pressure him, because guys like Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle are so hard to contain once they have the ball in their hands, once they have an opening. So I think you kind of have to start at the source if you're this defense and kind of simplify things in the back end, make sure those guys are covered, and make sure you're finding a way to generate pressure. Move Myles Garrett around the line if you have to. I think it would be really interesting to see him come, since Tua is left-handed, to come over to that side and kind of go at his blind side from the opposite side of where he normally plays, because I think you really have to find a way to take advantage in that aspect of the game and stop these receivers from getting going in the first place.
Yeah, I would say you want to try to get some balls batted down. He's not the tallest guy in the world, so that's another one. The Dolphins' defense is not stellar. So they're giving up about as many yards, exactly 4.6 yards per carry as the Browns. So that's the other thing. Nick Chubb and that offensive line, start moving people around now.
Yeah, I mean, and again, that's why I think it's so important that if Wyatt Teller can play this game, that he plays, because of that pulling that he does and the kind of openings that the front of this offensive line can generate for Nick Chubb, can generate for Kareem Hunt. But I also think the Browns really will need another performance out of Jacoby Brissett, kind of like what they got against the Bengals. And truly, that's like maybe the best game Jacoby Brissett is going to have, what he did against Cincinnati. But I really think you have to come close to replicating that and getting, especially that connection with Amari Cooper going, because if you can get those passes and maybe some explosive plays in that pass game from your reliable targets, Amari Cooper, Donovan Peoples-Jones, it will help open things up on the ground for Nick Chubb especially. But I do think, Nick Chubb has a chance here once again. We basically say that every week. The joke has become on our preview podcast, like we're basically always taking the Nick Chubb over for total rushing yards in any game at this point. I don't even know what the number would have to be to make me pick the under, because Nick Chubb has truly just been that consistent this year.